Hi everyone, thank you so much for being here this afternoon. We're super excited to present to you our strategy for UOB Mighty. So what we want to do is turn UOB Mighty from just a banking and finance app into a lifestyle app. And I'm here with my colleagues Pranay, Sharon, Julie, and my name is Kaylee, and we'll be jumping into our strategy. So what we're going to cover here today are three main things. We're going to talk about the current situation in regards to UOB Mighty as well as the mobile banking industry as a whole. Next, we'll jump into our recommendation and talk about our two-pronged strategy, which involves a peer-to-peer payments enhancement to UOB Mighty, as well as a new feature, the Mighty Man chatbot. And then finally, we'll talk about the impact of our recommendation and what kind of impact that'll have on our current customers and how we can rebrand with our new improvements. But before going any further, we'd like to just have you picture one thing. We like to think about this NUS student who's studying business. His name is Matthew Pei, and he is a very social character, one of the most popular guys on campus, and he loves to eat laksa. So just to put a face to the name, Matthew Pei, if you don't mind standing up and just letting everyone know. So we want you guys to keep Matthew in mind as we go through our presentation, because we think that our strategies can have a lot of positive impact to customers like Matthew. So directing your attention back to the slides, we want to address three main issues that we currently see in the marketplace right now. So the first issue is the negative reviews on the UOB Mighty app. Ever since the latest version launched in March 2016, there has been a soar in the negative reviews of UOB Mighty app. So therefore, we want to address how we can rebrand the app so that these reviews become more positive. The second issue that we like to address is a negative perception on mobile banking as a whole. So many people, especially Singaporeans, prefer to carry cash or credit cards. However, we want to show them that cashless payments and peer-to-peer payments, which we'll talk about more later, are actually a great value add to daily and personal life. And the third aspect we'd like to address is the competitive landscape. We know that currently all banks have their own mobile banking applications. However, we think with our new improvements and new features, we believe that UOB Mighty can really differentiate itself from other banking apps. And here we have our two-pronged strategy that we'd like to discuss today. The first is the peer-to-peer payments enhancement that we'd like to make. And the second is a new Mighty Man chatbot feature that my colleagues will talk a little bit more about. So Julie will now dive into the first strategy.
Thank you, Kaylee. So looking a little bit deeper into the first prong of our strategy, we looked at 4 different opportunity areas currently embedded within the Mighty application. We used 4 different sets of criteria in order to assess these opportunity areas for which we could improve. The first of which was expanding our current list of food locations. The second is expanding this feature to encompass entertainment. The third is improving upon the technical optimization. And finally, improving the current P2P payments platform in the app. And so, looking at these 4 criteria, we felt that expanding food locations, while we believe would increase the number of user activity, would not be much of a value add, as well as offer differentiation, as many other applications on the market currently offer similar services. Second, expanding into entertainment would have similar impacts, as there are already currently many other applications, and we felt that this would take away from the core banking service. Third, technical optimization. We believe that while there would be an increase in potential user activity, by focusing our efforts here would not allow us to maintain competitiveness in the market. And finally, we decided to pull our resources and focus on P2P payments, as we believe this would have the greatest long-term strategy in terms of being able to continue differentiating from competitors, as well as be a value add to customers. And while we believe that maintaining these other 3 core areas and continuously improving upon them is extremely important, we want to maintain focus on this last segment. So imagine Matthew and his friend go out to get laksa for lunch. They have a great great lunch. They are about to pay for the meal, and unfortunately, Matthew remembers that he has left his wallet at home. He unfortunately has to embarrassingly ask his friend to pay for his meal, but thankfully, because of the new streamlined, convenient, and simplified UI for the Mighty Pay feature, he is able to pay his friend back right then and there. On the cab way back, Matthew similarly has to have his friend pay for the cab, but thankfully his friend can charge him, look him up in the MightyPay app through a simple phone number or name, find Matthew, and then charge him and split the fare. So Matthew continues to realize the potential benefits from using this newly improved P2P payment platform. And as he continues to reap the benefits, he finds it more convenient than carrying cash and eventually turns his consumer behavior to one that is cashless. And as Matthew's friends continue to see him reap the benefits through the social network, they will similarly adapt their behavior to use the MightyPay app. In the end, through the social network effect, UOB Mighty is able to turn itself into a social network and incorporate itself into the everyday lives of its customers. And now I will pass it on to Shrim, who will speak a little bit more about the second prong of our strategy.
Thank you, Julie. So we looked into several opportunities in expanding the features already available in the MightyPay app. We used the same criteria that we used to analyze the options for improvement to analyze the opportunities for expansion. There are several opportunities for expansion, such as adding in an investment brokerage service, adding crowdfunding and crowd lending features, incorporating financial news into the application, and a chatbot customer service feature. We looked and evaluated at each of these options, and we found that an investment brokerage wouldn't appeal to the core key demographic of the application. We saw that crowd lending, while it would offer a point of differentiation, would be very difficult to develop and maintain and would be distanced from the core lending business of UOB. Finally, financial news, while increasing the number of users and adding value to their customers, would not be differentiated at all from what was existingly out there. So we settled on expanding our application by developing a chatbot feature. What a chatbot is an automated AI and rule-based driven application feature that allows customers to interact with features of the application in a very familiar contextual manner through a chat application. Meet MightyMan. MightyMan is a chatbot that is driven and supported by secular trends in the industry. Because we see chatbot taking off in various segments, we believe it can be implemented in banking as well. As you can see here, there are 3 key trends that support the adoption and investment of a chatbot. 70% of customers leave banks because of poor customer service. With our chatbot, we can increase customer retention rate and improve on operational efficiency by reducing the amount of human headcount we have for customer service. Furthermore, 20% of greater users stay active on chat applications versus other social network and other peer applications. While these statistics are great, we have to look at real-world justification. We look at the case study of Concur. Concur was able to capitalize on several features of a chatbot and increase the amount of time that it took to detect fraud positives and decrease the number of false positives they had as well. It was also able to reduce the processing time it took for an application. So let's dive into MightyMan. MightyMan is a contextual chat application that allows Matthew, our prime customer, to ask questions to the application. Instead of going through confusing menus and unintuitive interfaces, Matthew can ask questions such as, how much do I have left in my account? When is my next credit card bill due? How much can I spend on a particular night? In a very familiar and usable fashion. Let's walk through a scenario. Matt wants to go out for a night on the town. He loves to go to Zouk and get crazy on the dance floor. However, he wants to know how much he can spend on one given night. Instead of doing the calculations himself, which may be difficult, he can immediately ask MightyMan how much money he's able to spend at Zouk at night. MightyMan will not only tell him the amount of money he's available to spend, but correlate that and put it in context with his budgetary goals, which can also be managed through a UOB application. But we all know that the best laid plans can go awry. So the next morning, when Matt wakes up from his hard hangover, he can see and ask MightyMan how much money he spent at the previous night. MightyMan can immediately tell him that he spent this amount of money and the locations that he spent it at. Furthermore, MightyMan can go into when his credit card payments are due and how much money he needs to save to meet those goals. We believe that this, in conjunction with the peer-to-peer payments feature, will offer a highly differentiated service and collect numerous amounts of data on our customers for long-term strategies. Pranay is going to talk about the impact of these two strategies that we've covered.
Thank you, Sharon. So taking a step back, let's look at the benefits that Matthew has seen by using the P2P payments feature as well as a Mighty Man. So ultimately, the Mighty app will become more user-friendly and an application that users are familiar with and want to use. We want to ultimately make sure that we are retaining the customers and also keeping customers engaged within the application itself. And both of these features and add-ons onto the Mighty app will help encourage that. So the benefits from the application improvement, incorporating and changing from an account to a peer-to-peer system, are that it creates a more user interface that customers really like. With the P2P payment system, we are creating a social network and having individuals interact with each other on the Mighty application itself. Additionally, it promotes, as I said earlier, customer adoption and customer engagement. With Mighty Man, we're decreasing the churn rate of users by making sure that customer service is addressed at the on its first contact, ensuring that customers don't leave UOB because they've had a bad customer service. Secondly, it simplifies the application navigation through a familiar interface, as many individuals are used to messaging apps. And finally, it increases the frequency of user activity within the application itself. Now, there are definitely some risks associated with our plans, and I would like to go into the top 3 risks that we've identified, as well as what strategies we can go ahead to mitigate those risks. The first is considering Matt. What if he doesn't like the UI that we've come up with? Well, what we want to do is incorporate his feedback during the product development phase, ensure that his feedback is actually matters and is incorporated into the overall UI design, so that the Mighty app actually is a product and application that customers want, one they need, and one they use. Secondly, we want to make sure, we want to see what if individuals want to stay with the traditional payment methods of cash and credit. What if they don't want to switch to a cashless system? We're going to go ahead and mitigate this strategy by looking and partnering with other government fintech organizations that have a similar purpose of going to a cashless system and furthering the partnerships there. And finally, our third risk is, what if Mighty Man is not utilized as much as we would like it to be? And again, we want to go ahead and use customer feedback and data from our beta testing during the product development lifecycle and ensure that Mighty Man is actually a feature that customers will use. Now I would like to go into the execution plan as to how we're going to go about implementing our 2-pronged strategy. We see that we've taken a conservative approach and say that we will have a launch, product development, beta testing, and launch, and finish by the end of 2018. However, this timeline can definitely be sped up depending on how we look at it. And what we want to do throughout this process is have milestone checkpoints in order to ensure that we are currently on track and meeting the goals that we want to be, and go ahead and assess and reevaluate how we're going about the overall execution of the plan. Now, thinking back to the ultimate question, currently UOB Mighty is an application that addresses financial needs for consumers. With our 2-pronged strategy, what we want to do is change this and make UOB Mighty a lifestyle. Thank you so much, and I would like to open the floor to questions.
So imagine Matthew, who forgot to bring his wallet, and P2P allows Matthew to pay his friend, both for the meal split as well as the cab fare. But this example that you cite, right, it could also be solved by Matthew being a Mighty user, right? Or Mighty expanding into transport or cab. So if you look at slide 4, what I was thinking, and perhaps the question here is, are there other features that should be in there to kind of land that P2P payment is the best type of way forward? Because I assume revenue potential, size of market, these are important things to consider as well.
So that's a great question. And we saw that UOB made a foray into integrating with point of sales such as restaurants and cabs already with the dining sector. But the problem with this is that it's very difficult to get infrastructure in place at all of these locations and make it exclusive to UOB. Because all of the transactions take place within UOB's application and different fees are assessed to users who are outside the UOB application ecosystem, driving them inward, we are able to ensure that the UOB application is more correlated with the overall lifestyle without having to go into fields that don't correlate with its core business. Above all, UOB is a bank. It's not a point of sale system, it's not a cab service, it's a bank. And by coordinating peer-to-peer transactions, it can extend and fill a gap, a void that cannot be solved by credit cards or existing avenues currently.
Thank you. So what you're saying is that we should move away from the original intent of Mighty and, you know, fill the void of a banking service using Mighty. But, you know, moving away from the original intent of Mighty, connecting lifestyle and traditional banking services.
So we are not moving away from the intent, only the execution. The intent of Mighty UOB Mighty Pay is still to incorporate into the lifestyle. If we go to our appendix slide regarding the UI design, as you'll be able to see, it is not structured like a traditional banking app. It is structured like a social network app, where I can see how my friends have made payments in the past and what payments that have been made around me. By doing this, we are able to leverage differentiation from our competitors and provide a UI that customers are familiar with. The UI that we're speaking of is on the extreme right example. We've taken it upon ourselves to do a quick mock-up of what the payments application would look like and make it more geared toward a social network on top of your existing infrastructure.
I wanted to, talk a little bit about the risks. I think you misidentified the risks. Or, I mean, you identified some risks, but basically they're meaningless in the context of a broader set of risks. So let me do this by way of a few questions. So who are the competitors for UOB?
So the direct competitors are definitely DSB and OCBC, but aside from that, along our strategy, other competitors would be startups and other fintech companies that are looking to do peer-to-peer payment systems, and then similarly other fintech organizations that are looking to go cashless.
Okay, so we have 3 banks in Singapore. UOB is ranked 1, 2 in most banking areas. Okay. If they grab market share, who do they grab it from?
So our strategy is focused on 2 things. One is retaining our current.
Just answer the question, please.
So we would grab market share from both, essentially, and that's by incorporating individuals into the social
Right,
network.
just answer the question. So you would grab market share from DBS and OCBC. So it's a very clear trade-off between 3 banks, unlike in a more, say, rich bank setting where there's many competitors, and if you grab market share, it's not clear that others are going to suffer. So what's going to be the likely reaction of the other banks?
So typical companies would go ahead and potentially also incorporate similar features in their application since there is no patterns or any.
So we have to be concerned about competitive retaliation. So the second question is, who are the as currently structured, who are the current competitors for UOB Mighty?
So for UOB Mighty, it would be similar competitors.
The competitors for UOB Mighty are DBS and OCBC?
And
Right, so the competitors we identified for UOB Mighty, and especially the new features that we've been rolling out, are competitors such as Venmo and Paylaw, competitors that exist and provide similar services in this space. So we are competing in 2 markets. If you're asking overarching what our long-term strategy of differentiation is from our competitors, we can go into that further, unless that's
No,
not
I'm
clear.
just wondering if you understand who the competitors are.
Yes.
Okay. So just to clarify, why does Mighty Man help you in this competitive landscape?
Sure. So one of the biggest problems in the competitive landscape for banking applications is the challenging user interface. Because the user interface is daunting and it's difficult to access the myriad of features that a banking app provides, MightyMan is a contextual interface that provides
These are
information.
the technical features. I'm talking about competitive features. That's what I'd like to hear more.
Sure. So as of right now, no other banking application has such an interface integrated into its application. But long term, we realize that they will integrate these applications as well. There's a case study on CatSal that was done, which is a chatbot application that has been invested in by companies such as DBS, Wells Fargo, and others. We are aware of this competition. Thank you.
I've got two questions, right? How could a payment feature become a social network? That's the first question. Usually it's the other way around. Social network takes on P2P payments. So how could you make a payment feature become a social network?
So there are two reasons why we see that our payment feature becoming a social network and not the typical other way around. Because UOB already has the existing infrastructure in place to facilitate these payments and an existing app user base, it is easier to pivot the display of payments simply by redesigning and reorganizing the user interface that already exists within the application.
Okay, but by that logic, anyone with a P2P network can build a social network.
Not without the proper execution. So because
So anyone that has a P2P network proper execution can build a social network.
yes,
Then why aren't there more social networks?
because no one can achieve the proper execution. That is the most
Okay.
that is the most
Okay,
difficult part
Thank
of
you.
this.
The second question is, on page 4 and page 7, you listed all the options you analyzed, right? Like P2P payments, the chatbot. Why were these the 8 finalists? Why not something else? I mean, what methodology did you use to ensure that these were the right options to put in the evaluation?
So when we came to evaluating those options, we started with a larger scope of banking features that are already offered by competitors and looked at points where we could differentiate. Because there are very few, no chatbots integrated within banking applications and very few standalone chatbots for financial services, we found this to be our prime point of differentiation, and that's how we narrowed down our methodology. The other items that made the list were other services offered by banks.
Okay, but how did you ensure that these examples or options that you listed could be executed by UOB and differentiated, because then anyone could execute this?
Right, so we chose not to execute on the other strategies listed, and we chose to focus on the MightyMan strategy. So those other strategies were considered and rejected because of lack of differentiation or difficulty of developing the applications.
Hi. So you quoted DBS Payla and Casistos by DBS, right? As so you do know that they are exactly MightyMan and the P2P that you're recommending. So why would launching P2P and MightyMan on Mighty differentiate us from the largest competitors that we have when they already provide the same services?
Currently in the Southeast Asian market, there aren't any other applications such as MightyMan, as well as the social peer-to-peer payment platform integrated into the banking apps. And so we believe that by...
But you quoted Payla, which is a P2P system, by DBS, and then you showed Casistos, which was invested by DBS and launched here as well. So how can you say that there's no other bank that provides this?
We're saying there's no other bank that provides an integrated one-stop solution. So even with Casisto, it hasn't been integrated fully into DBS's application infrastructure, and Paylaw has been marketed separately. But our consumer research in a study by Accenture found that banking applications, the most attractive feature was a one-stop shop. Consumers don't want to have to download multiple apps in order to gain access to the features that they look for in a banking application.
Just on MightyMan, I want to understand the operations behind it. Is it a bot that's developed with complex algorithm, or is it like a person at the call center, level 2 service desk in Philippines and India?
Can you repeat your question?
Like, how does it work? Like, how does Mighty Man work? Is it a very complex algorithm, a robot, a script that's made, or is it a service desk person sitting in an outsourced center? That's it. It's okay. It's just
No. So Mighty Man is a partially rules-based and partially AI-driven application. So there's no physical person behind it. And if we have some slides on potential development opportunities. So what tools UOB can use in order to develop this particular application, as well as potential acquisition targets. If you can go.
No, that's fine. I understand it.
Okay.
So it's a robot. But it's a
Yeah.
very complex robot because the screenshots are very sophisticated.
Yes.
Your situation analysis, right? You listed the negative reactions to the app, the need to basically develop the mobile banking industry because it's very competitive. Why are these three the most pertinent facts in the situation analysis? How did you arrive at, you were given lots of information, why are these three the most important ones?
So your question is why these two strategies address the negative reviews the most?
No, I'm asking you why in your situation analysis you listed 3 key points, right? One of them is the negative application reviews. The other is the need to change negative consumer perception around mobile payments. And the third is competitive mobile banking industry. Why are these three the most important facts to bring out?
Yeah, definitely. So we think that these three are the most important facts to consider because they kind of encompass the problems on both like a macro level, which is the competitive landscape, as well as the customer preferences for cash and credit card, as well as like the customer, as well as a micro level, which is kind of like the negative reviews and people not liking the interface or thinking it's too difficult to use. So we think that because we want UOB Mighty to be an app that really addresses customer preferences, that these three aspects kind of really drive down to why people are
How do you
using
know
UOB.
that these are the most pertinent ones? What way did you analyze the case to come to the conclusion that of all the facts you could state, these are the most important ones?
So when you look at the mobile applications and how users download it and ultimately use it, we see that there are individuals would download an app and within 2 to 3 days they would uninstall the application. So we don't want that with UOB Mighty, right? So customer perception and how they perceive the application itself is very important if we want individuals to use the application and constantly have it on their phone. So that was the regarding the first aspect, why we want to actually have, we want to change the negative perception around the application. The second one in regards to the overall change from changing the perception around the traditional payment methods is because for the P2P system and for UOB Mighty to actually work, individuals and the consumer perception on using cash and credit cards has to ultimately change to being comfortable using your mobile phone in order to make payments. And ultimately, we also want to understand the competitive landscape and how we can go about differentiating ourselves from our competitors. And that's exactly why we chose those three for our situation analysis.
Okay. Earlier you mentioned under risk and mitigation churn rate. Could you clarify a little bit more in terms of what's the data point around churn? What's the definition of churn for this particular case? Is it perhaps or leaving the account altogether?
Yeah, so the churn rate, as we see that from an Accenture study as well, we see that 70% of users actually leave banks because their first interaction with customer service had gone negatively. And so ultimately that goes back to the customer perception around UOB Mighty. And what we want to do is change that. So the churn rate comes from that regard. We want to ensure with the RoboChat and Mighty Man that we are addressing customer needs and customer service on the first-hand account and making sure that they are having a positive interaction when they use you. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Titans Inc., for your wonderful presentation. We will now take a 10-minute break. Please return promptly at 2:20 p.m. Doors will be locked and audience will only be able to enter at the next presentation.